So, who started?
I'll start. Okay. Okay, so quickly, I mean, just to start, what we are looking at in this chapter is how the anti-terror laws have specifically targeted two communities. And the first one that we are talking about is the Muslim community, how they've been unfairly used against them. And the second one is how they have been unfairly used to target Adivasis and other marginalized communities, and we've looked at the case of Chattisgarh for that. And so how, in a certain sense, how do we bring this within the exclusion framework that the other chapters have been talking about, is that pretty much that these communities are not excluded from a positive good like say education or health, but actually they are excluded from the justice system. So that is the exclusion factor. That's how. So we are basically saying it's a negative exclusion in that sense, where something that ordinarily they should have, which is access to justice, procedural fairness, and right to a free trial and so on, is something that they don't get. This chapter is slightly more, I think, legalistic than some of the others. Simply because we've really looked, I mean, the whole thing is about anti-terror laws, so we've really gone into the details of the laws, and our case studies also look at that. So I mean, hopefully we've tried to put the laws in a way that are not very difficult, and we've tried to show through our case studies how these are, exercised on the ground. So I mean, we have a lot of, I think legal jargon in it, but we've tried to simplify it and so on. Okay, so quickly, I mean, just to start now with the chapter, is that we have placed it in this whole, the theoretical part of it actually deals with the fact that there cannot be a utilitarian justification for saying that if we torture, this whole argument that if we torture terrorists, if we torture one terrorist, then 50 lives will be saved. If the terrorist knows about a particular bomb blast that will happen in X place, it is okay to torture him because, it will actually save 100 or 200 lives. Because that is precisely the utilitarian kind of justification that goes against the concept of minority rights or the rule of law or human rights. Because we are saying that it's okay to do something which is completely illegal and wrong just because it is in the greater good of the greater number. And that's the theoretical framework of the chapter where we've said that this utilitarian argument actually does not work because it is precisely for these times that these laws have been made. So it's only when the laws of war operate in war because it's most difficult to uphold human rights during war. That's why these laws of war are there. So it's not okay to say, okay, now we can do away with these, this Bush kind of a doctrine, that it's okay to do away with this, Geneva Convention because, 9/11 has happened and so on. So kind of the theoretical framework is based on that sort of challenging that utilitarian justification. And then And I'm going to go, straight into, because I think I have limited time. So, I'll just go straight to this, one of the main case studies that we've looked at to illustrate this whole idea of targeting of Muslim youth is the student Islamic movement of India. And I'll just go into the details of that because that will show, like how the procedural standards have been diluted, how, how the rule of law, which is usually applicable in all cases, has been completely done away with. And in fact, I think one of the things is that earlier when we used to say quota or TADA is in existence, there was a lot of, I think, opposition from the human rights groups and the civil society groups that, oh, these are anti-terror laws, let's repeal them. But after the repeal of quota and TADA, what has happened is that a lot of the stringent provisions have actually sort of been sneaked into the UNPA, which, because it does not use the word terrorism in, I think they've kind of drafted it quite skillfully because they haven't used the word terrorism in the acronym or the law itself, that it somehow has evaded the kind of scrutiny which is required but does exactly the same thing. And in fact, worse, because if you look at the whole question of membership and criminalizing membership of these organizations. So that's another way that, that the UFPA hasn't got the kind of attention that it should have, and so on. Okay, so the case of SIMI is the Student Islamic Movement of India. It was actually banned immediately after the 2001 9/11 attack. The first thing that they'll tell you is that they were completely shocked that this actually happened, and they were not expecting it at all, because they operated merely as a student organization which maintained extensive membership records. And there was actually, there was no hiding of the membership or the kind of things they were doing. All the pamphlets or whatever, that they were distributing, the conferences that they were organizing, everything was overground until 2001. And suddenly, it is banned under the UAPA, their offices are sealed, and all of this material is confiscated, including their membership records and registers. And after that, the case starts. And so SIMI has, again, the SIMI ban has been continuously being upheld since 2001. So every 2 years, and I think, again, Sudeep is here and he's represented them. Again, I think every 2 years when the ban was upheld, SIMI was, at some point in time hopeful that they will actually, the ban will be lifted or the tribunal is going to stay there. And this happened only once in 2008 when the ban came up for review in front of Justice Geeta Mittal, who actually found the ban illegal. And obviously she removed the ban on SIMI, and immediately next day the central government, went to the Supreme Court and got a stay on that order. So, again, it was, and so there are a whole lot of cases that are pending in the Supreme Court against the ban at that level. And again, a new ban is again going to be issued very soon. But I think the worst point about it is that even though this organization is banned, the police is still picking up people and fabricating cases against other Muslim youth, saying they are part of SIMI and they are involved in X bomb blast or Y bomb blast, or that they are doing, things, that they are members of this organization. And every time they come to the SIMI, to ask them, like, is this person, they say, we don't have our records, you've taken all our records. How do we know if someone is part of our organization or not? And how is it that on the basis of that, you are again picking up new and new men? And they're targeting a lot of new people, and across, you see MP Chattisgarh, not Chattisgarh so much, but Madhya Pradesh and Rajasthan, and even other states in UP, and that the police is picking up in Maharashtra, saying that these are SIMI people and they've been involved in these things. I just want to quickly come, to one of the important parts, which is the consequences of what happens. And I think that obviously consequences. The most important thing is that there are huge psychosocial impacts. And so when you talk to people, some of who are subsequently acquitted in these cases, they are completely scarred, because even if they are not guilty, they've been in prison for 10, 15 years. A lot of them were young when they were picked up. And they've lost, in fact, their entire youth, and they don't know what to do with themselves, what jobs, and so on. And so really, it has great psychosocial impacts, not only for them but also for their families. Of course, the whole terrorist tag never goes away, so it continues to follow you wherever you want to. You cannot get jobs, it's much harder. The government does very little to help you. There's really been no trend of compensation or reparations to people who've been who've been illegally confined for a long time. And so loss of livelihood, how do you then start building up a life after 15 years of being wrongly tried and then subsequently.
I just want to quickly talk about the sources for this case study. We've relied extensively on both the sort of data collected by as well as the analysis of Shalini Gira from the Chattisgarh Legal Aid Group. It's a group of lawyers which is trying to fill the very deep legal aid vacuum in Chattisgarh currently, and they're also currently part of the team. Shalini is part of the team representing Soni Suri at the Supreme Court. We've also sort of looked at court judgments and bail petitions in putting together this information. The context in which I'll be talking about Soni Suri's case is basically a situation where the security apparatus in Chattisgarh controls and affects almost all aspects of daily life. And that comes out very strongly in the narratives that many people who felt falsely implicated in these cases bring out. From a criminal justice system standpoint, the legal aid group did an analysis of the disposal of cases in Chattisgarh between 2005 and 2012, which some of you may have read about in the Hindu. Just as an example, in the cases disposed of in between from 2005 to 2006, around 10% had the ANZAC, and by 2012, this had increased to over 40% for just the ANZAC alone. There's also, as you would imagine, a very high rate of acquittal in all these cases because a number of these cases are indeed fabricated and they lack even the most basic evidence. In many, very often, what Varisha spoke about in terms of the patterns of charges and the evidence used, all the witnesses you'll find, if there are 161 witnesses in a case, they'll all use the same language when they talk about what has happened and what they saw. And I sort of see that to be a sort of malicious lack of imagination. It's like they are not even like trying, but it's completely intended to be that way. It's also taking much longer for people to get acquitted. So in 2005, they found that the average amount of time it would take was about 3 years. Now that's gone up to close to 6 years. What that means is that if you are in a custodial situation where you are a high security inmate, you will be denied the most basic rights. You will very often be kept in isolation, and there are very major implications for family, as in Soni Suri's case, as we